I went from being a person who always wanted to write a book to a New York Times best-selling author with over 1 million copies sold worldwide. And I can tell you right now, it's all because of the man you see right here. Welcome back to the Daily Connoisseur. I am so excited for today's interview. You heard the intro. This man right here, Alan Watt, is responsible, honestly, I believe, for my writing career. And I learned everything that I learned about writing from him. And he is such an honored guest. I'm so excited for him to be on the channel and to introduce you to him today. So Al, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. What about you?
Good. Yeah, doing great, thanks.
You're just one of those people where I see you and I'm just instantly happy. I just have so many good memories of that time in my life when I took your class. So Al runs the LA Writers Lab and the 90-day novel, the 90-day screenplay. He is just writing teacher extraordinaire. And I don't know how I stumbled upon your classes, but this was back in, what, 2007?
Something like that.
Yeah. 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And taking Al's class, I enrolled in his class, the 90-day novel, and now he has telecourses, and you can, people from all around the world can take his classes. But back then, you physically went to the class, right? So I went to his class, and my entire life changed. And it was just one of the best, other than living in Paris, taking Al's class was like the renaissance of my life, where my life just changed. So yeah, I'm sorry, I can't stop talking, but that's because I'm so excited that you're here. So just welcome, and I'm so excited to talk to aspiring writers today.
Yeah, hi, aspiring writers.
Yeah, hi. So Al, I'm going to leave all of your information below, but let's just jump right in. What advice do you have for aspiring writers, people who want to write a book but just don't know how to get started?
Well, I guess my first piece of advice is that if you want to be a storyteller, that you should be writing every day, and that there is also a craft involved in story. And so I could maybe talk a little bit about the way I work and what I teach. And basically the way I work is that I believe that the story lives fully and completely within the writer, and that my job is to facilitate writers in finding that story. And I think the challenge sometimes for novice writers is that you can sometimes, you've got this great idea, and then you start writing it, and at the beginning it's really fun and exciting, and then at some point it feels like the characters aren't really doing what you want them to do, or they're not, they sort of, you feel like they're pieces on a chessboard that you're moving around, and it can start to feel frustrating. And so the first piece of advice I would give you is that you want to learn the craft of story structure, because without really having a grounding in story structure, you can start to feel like your story at some point just starts to flatline.
That's really good advice. Yes. Yeah. Story structure. That's what I got from you. I have to say that the biggest piece of information that I got from you, and this sounds so obvious, but I honestly, is what I took from your class the most, is that you need to be writing every single day.
Yeah.
And sitting down and just showing up and writing every day. And previous to that, I had in my mind that I needed to write 6 or 7 hours a day. And then I would try to do that, and then I would burn out, and then I wouldn't write for a week, and then nothing was happening. And
even if it's just 15 minutes or a half hour, I tell writers sometimes, you've got people, they've got full-time jobs, they've got families like yourself, but if you can write 15 minutes or a half hour in the morning before you go to work, it's incredible. If you wrote a page every day, the end of a year, you'd have a book. Right.
And Al's class, one of his classes is called the 90-day novel, and I can tell you, I mean, how many books I've written a lot of books, and my first book that I actually wrote in your class has never been published. the mystery, Davina. Remember Davina?
Yeah.
I wrote that novel in 90 days, and it's
First
possible.
draft. The first draft.
Sorry,
Yeah,
yes, the first draft, exactly.
The rewrite can take a little bit longer.
Yes.
But once you've got that first draft down, once you've got your manuscript, you're not working off a blank page anymore. And so the challenge is with the 90-day novel, is to get to the end without going back and rewriting, because there's lots of people that have a really good half a novel sitting in their drawer. You've got to get to the end of the story, because once you get to the end of the story, you're going to understand your story in a way that you couldn't possibly understand it had you not finished the first draft.
Yes, and that helps with revision, because you can, exactly. How can you revise? I think another thing that I used to do was I would revise as I went along. Mm-hmm. I would never get past a certain threshold, and that was so frustrating.
Right, because when you get to the end, that's where you really begin to understand on a kind of gut level what your story is actually about.
Yes.
We're sort of galloping toward the end, hoping, oh my gosh, is this going to work out? Sometimes we don't even know how it's going to end.
Right.
But when we get to end, now we can start to shape it, because everything in the story is leading to the end.
Yes, absolutely. So you would tell amateur or aspiring writers to write every day and to focus on structure. Is that right?
Yeah. Learn about story structure. It's something I talk. It's something I talk about in my books: 90-day novel, 90-day screenplay, 90-day rewrite. That there are key ingredients to story structure. If I were to distill story structure to 3 words, I'd say it's desire. Your protagonist has to want something really badly. The stakes are life and death. And then surrender. Your protagonist has to let go of the meaning they make out of their goal. And then finally, transformation. As a result, and we can all relate to this as human beings, we want something really badly, and then, oh my gosh, it doesn't work out the way we thought it would, and so we let go of the meaning, and then transformation, we reframe our relationship to our goal, and it becomes possible to get what we want if it belongs in our life.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, so good. It's all coming back to me now. Yes. And for those of you who don't know, Al does classes, and he also has books. I'm going to leave everything down below. So if you want to check out his books, I'll leave them down below on Amazon or wherever. You can pick those up and read those and get all of this information as well. So I'll leave those down below. So what do amateur or aspiring writers get wrong? What do they get wrong?
A lot of the time, with aspiring writers, they tend to focus on the plot. Like, I've just got to figure out my plot. And Einstein says you can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness that created the problem. In other words, every story begins with a dramatic problem that seems to want to be solved, but it actually doesn't. It wants to be resolved through a shift in perception. In other words, the purpose of story is really to reveal a transformation. And so when we try and focus on plot, as Einstein says, we get stuck. We can't get to the end. We can't figure it out, because story is really about a shift in perception, about seeing something in a new way. And so what I've kind of discovered and what I teach is a process of connecting not to your protagonist's apparent problem, but realizing that what your protagonist is really struggling with is in fact a dilemma. And a dilemma is a problem that can't be solved without creating another problem. And that there are 2 ingredients to a dilemma: a powerful desire, like we were just talking about, and a false belief. So, like, for example, let's say it's the dilemma of faith. Powerful desire would be, I want to believe. And a false belief might be, when you prove it or when you give me evidence, then I'll believe. And so you can see how that would be the beginning of a powerful story, because it's going to explore the nature of faith, but the character has doubt, and until they find evidence, they will never believe. But the dilemma, the nature of faith is that you're not going to have evidence until you believe.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. It's like the character is its own worst enemy.
Just like life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's so good. So
Yeah,
you are both a fiction writer and a nonfiction writer. So Al is the author of a book called Diamond Dogs that was
yeah.
just an explosive bestseller and just one of those thrillers that you can't put down, really.
Oh, thank you.
And that was your first book, and the story behind you writing that book is pretty crazy. Can you just tell us that story really quickly, or a summarized
I
version?
I wrote the book in about 90 days. I wrote the first draft in 90 days, and which is what gave me the idea. Because when I started teaching workshops, and I had people in my workshops for years working on their first drafts, I suddenly one day went, wait a second, this is taking way too long, and that was how I thought. How did I have my first success? And I thought, well, because I wrote my first draft quickly. But I wrote, I think I know what you're asking me. So I wrote my first draft in 90 days. I did a quick rewrite, and I got the book through a friend of mine to a book agent in New York, and she auctioned it, and there was a bidding war for the book, and she sold the book, and then it became a bestseller, and it won lots of awards. And it really, the thing it made me really realize is that I had kind of a big surrender. I had been writing for years and I hadn't sold anything. And one day I woke up and I thought, I actually had a mentor at the time. This was about 20 years ago, and I called her up and I said, I can't do this alone. And she said, oh, my dear, whoever said you had to? And that's when I realized that I had been trying to kind of I'd been trying to figure it all out. I was trying to write from my prefrontal cortex as opposed to writing from my heart, and realizing that the story really lives within me. And this is going to sound really kind of woo-woo, but I needed to invite in the writing angels. And I needed to, do you know what I mean? I needed to realize that I'm not the author, I'm the channel. And when I'm the channel, I give myself way more permission to let whatever wants to come out land on the page. And so when I started doing that, everything changed. And so that's, I don't know if that's
That answers the question.
Yeah, and it really began me wanting to share this process, because I feel like I had been so stubborn with my own writing, with kind of my idea of what I thought it meant to be a writer, and because I was the guy who would write 8 or 10 hours every day, and I was making a living as a stand-up comic at the time. So my bread and butter happened after 9 o'clock at night, but I had all day to work on screenplays and novels. But it wasn't until I really began to understand that I'm not the author, I'm the channel, that everything changed.
Well, so that's so interesting. So, but you're a writer of fiction, but you're also a nonfiction author, because you also wrote the 90-day novel, 90-day screenplay. So, these technical books to help writers.
Right.
So what's the difference between because I'm largely a nonfiction author as well, although I've written fiction books. So what would you say the difference is? Is there a different process with structure and all of that?
Well, I have to tell you, these books happened by accident, the nonfiction books, because when I sat down to teach the 90-day novel, I asked myself, I said, I want to do everything I can to help authors finish their book in 90 days. And so I came up with a basic workshop that would guide them. The first month is focusing on stream of consciousness writing exercises and allowing an outline to emerge. And then the next 2 months is actually writing the first draft. And so I decided I would write a daily letter to my students to accompany the weekly workshops. And I had no intention, never occurred to me to publish them until my writers kept saying, you should publish this.
I remember getting those letters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
that's right.
And I would read them every day.
And the first time I taught the workshop, I think I wrote about 50 letters because they took a while to write. So there were some days, and then the next time I did the workshop, I kind of had the 90 letters. and then I would refine them. And then I would also have a group forum. You were probably on a group forum where you would share with other writers your experience of what was going on. And then I incorporated that into the daily letters. And so I feel like I'm kind of an accidental nonfiction writer. They were all my students said you should publish these, and then I finally one day, after teaching the workshop about a dozen times, I decided to publish the books, and was surprised that it became the #1 book on writing for about 5 months.
Well, you were smart to do that. And it's funny because I became an accidental nonfiction author too, because when I was in your class, I was working on a fiction book. And the funny thing is, I tell everybody, oh yeah, I mean, what I want to be when I grow up is a fiction writer. So I always tell myself, when I'm kind of done with this period of my life, I am going to start writing fiction again.
Right.
Which I will. But it's funny that my nonfiction books just kind of took off, and it was the same thing. They were accidental. I started them on the blog, just to keep myself in the practice of writing. And people said, oh, you should turn this into a book, because I did that series, The Top 20 Things I Learned While Living in Paris.
Sure.
So then I thought, okay, it was the same thing where people were like, this should be a book. And then I thought, okay, let's make it a book,
But don't you think that's how it works? Is that your books became so popular because this is something you were really passionate about. You weren't, you didn't have any sort of calculated motive to monetize this. You had something that you genuinely wanted to share and that you were really passionate about. Yeah. And it connected with people.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people go into the self-help genre because both of our books are kind of self-help in a way, like, you could help yourself write a book, and with mine as well, with the motive of money and fame and prestige and all of that stuff. But truly, neither of us went in it with that. It's true. I had this story I had to tell. And it's so funny because I thought, I really got to tell this story about my time in Paris, and then I'll get back to my what I really want to do, And then the stories that I had were just very meaningful to people, and they still are. And so, that's how that happened. But I find nonfiction easier to write than fiction. Is that your case too?
That's not necessarily.
Okay.
It's but with nonfiction, here's the thing. My experience with nonfiction is that it was always I was working with writers, and I was very clear on what needed to happen next. Like, I would wake up in the morning, I would go, oh, they're on day 29. They're starting writing their first draft. So I need to talk to them about point of view, and voice, and how to write a strong beginning. And so I thought, well, what do I need to say about that? And I would sketch out my notes. So I always had a very clearly delineated sort of outline that I needed to follow. So I guess in that way, perhaps nonfiction may be easier, but there's also something really satisfying about losing yourself in a novel. It's also kind of terrifying because once you're in the middle of that novel, I have no idea if this is going to work out. I don't know where it's going, and even though I've got a kind of a rough outline, so they're completely different animals for sure.
I was just going to say that when I was working on my mystery and I was just in the middle of it, it was it's a wonderful feeling. It is terrifying. It's exciting. And when you really start getting in the flow of it, of writing every day, it's so exciting. All you want to do is just sit down and write. It's like you don't want to do anything else.
Right, because you've lost yourself in a world, and you can just go into your office and shut the door, and you can lose yourself in this world, and you're sort of playing God.
Yeah.
I bring this character in here, and I'll have them do this. And
and it's terrifying, and it's exciting, and it is just. I don't know. I'm hoping that people who are watching this interview who want to write a book are really inspired by this, because I can't tell you how many people I meet, and I meet a lot of moms, and they find out that I'm a writer, and they're like, I've always wanted to write a book. I've had a book, on my computer and they can't finish it. There's so many people out there. So I hope that this inspires them to just do it.
And I think that a lot of people think that it has to be a full-time endeavor.
No.
It doesn't. I have so many students who have full-time jobs.
Yeah.
And they get up in the morning and they write for an hour,
Mm-hmm.
and that's their writing for the day. They've got
that's what I did
to do. And the 90 days, they've got a first draft of a book.
Yeah, I did 1 hour a day, and I still do. I still do that. I've taken a break now. This is the longest break from writing a book I've ever taken. But we just had our fourth child, so I'm giving myself some grace. I remember when I was in your class.
I don't know how you do it.
I don't.
I go on the site, see those 500 and something videos you've got, all these books you've written. I don't know how on earth you do this.
Well, you know what? I love what I do, and that helps.
Yeah.
And everyday life, family life is hard. It's really hard, and it's exhausting. And I look forward to doing my work. So, that's why I do so much of it. That's why I'm prolific with all of that, because I do enjoy it.
And I think it is particularly tough for women and for mothers because my wife just went to pick our son up at school, and she's a writer. And having a kid and having 4 kids, it's a full-time job. I remember you telling me that you would do the videos after they went to bed, wouldn't you? Is that right?
Yes, or during the nap time, that's when I'll do a video. I do my writing in the morning because at the end of the day, I'm so exhausted and kind of sometimes in an angry, dark place. Because I'm just like, sometimes right before bed, I'm like, wow, this day was stolen from me, but I just don't feel like being creative right now, So I like to get up early in the morning and do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. You're fresh.
Yes, exactly. So how important is a routine for writers? So we've kind of talked about this, but you would definitely say at least 1 hour, at least half an hour a day, 15 minutes?
Whatever you can do, but the habit is more important than, make it consistent because we're creatures of habit. Let me see if I can articulate this. When you're writing and then you go to sleep, you wake up the next morning and your subconscious has been working while you've been sleeping, and it brings up the next thing to the surface. But if you interrupt that flow and don't write for 2 or 3 days, your subconscious loses connection to the story. So it's more, rather than writing 2 hours one day and then not writing for a few days, write a little bit each day because it keeps that thread going with your subconscious. And it's amazing. I don't know how it works. I remember when I first started writing being amazed at how my subconscious was always sort of holding the ball. And it would bring up, I would wake up the next morning, I thought I was completely out of ideas. And now there's a whole new crop of ideas.
Yes, exactly. I remember being in your class, raising my hand before I kind of knew about things. And I said, do we even have to write on Sundays? And everybody kind of laughed. I don't know if you remember that, but I was like, really? We also write on Sunday too? But yeah, no, I agree with that. You can't take a break. In fact, I'm going to start back into writing again pretty soon. I'm starting to sleep a bit more, and I'm a bit nervous about it, but I know that once I get into the flow, it's going to be good. I know that you have to go soon because your son's going to come back from school, but I wanted to ask quickly about getting published. So I think that you had a very unique situation with your first book that most people don't have. You got an agent right away. They shopped it. It was like auctioned, and I know you made a lot of money on your first advance. We won't say, the amount, but that most people do not have that experience. So what do you want to say about the publishing process?
Well, first of all, if you've got a manuscript and you're looking for a publisher, there's a website called Publishers Marketplace, and you can go on there, and I don't know what it is, but it's like $20-25 a month, and you can it will give you the names of all the sort of legitimate agents in New York and wherever. You can also type in the authors that you like or the authors that you are feel like you're in your wheelhouse, and you can get a list of their agents. So you can find agents that are sort of in line with what with your material. So that's the first thing I would say as far as how to get published or how to find an agent. And then what you want to do is you want to just write a very short bio and a short synopsis, a paragraph or two, and you can get all the emails for these agents. And so you can literally send it to 10 or you can send this short pitch to 10 or 20 agents at a time, and you might hear back from one or two if they're intrigued, and they may ask for the first 50 pages of your manuscript. So be prepared to send at least the first 50 pages. They'll read those, and if they're still interested, then they'll ask for the whole manuscript. That's just kind of like the nuts and bolts process. So be ready at least to have 50 pages, if not the whole manuscript. And sometimes with nonfiction books, I don't know if you found this, Jennifer, but you actually had a unique situation too with your nonfiction book, because you self-published it and then it became like a runaway success. Yes. And then every publisher came to you wanting a piece of it, right?
Right. Yeah, so there's two ways to go. I did try the way that you said, and I think a lot of people do try that, and some people are successful, but I had 50 rejections, right. And at that point, I thought, okay, I could have just let this collect dust on the shelf, or, thank God, this is around the time where self-publishing started being a thing. And I thought, what? They don't know what they're talking about. I'm just going to publish it myself, And I'm so glad I did. Look what happened. But, it would just be just something mommy did, back when she was in her 20s, collecting dust on a shelf. And now, over 1 million people have read the first Madame Chic book. And it's been amazing. So yeah, I would encourage people to first go the traditional route, because it is very, I would say, there's a lot of benefits to be published traditionally. Right. But if that doesn't work out, self-publishing is even easier now than it has ever been, right? I mean, I would imagine.
And I self-published all my writing books.
Yes.
God, I did. And something else I'll say is, because I think there might be a lot of writers out there who think that if they don't get a traditional publishing deal, then that somehow means that their work has less value. Mm-mm. And it doesn't. What it sometimes means, there were writers like Henry Miller and Charles Bukowski who never got published in the U.S. until they first got published in France, for example. And so sometimes it takes a while for the publishing industry to catch up to your ideas.
Yes.
And so, and I feel like that with what you were doing and with what I was doing, because I feel like my writing books are teaching process. They're not teaching result, because when you take care of the process, the result takes care of itself. And I think that kind of book, had I gone to a traditional publisher, would have scared them a little bit, because they're not used to that kind of a book. They're used to it contains nuts and bolts, but it also is experiential. It's not just a conceptual thing. So I think that if you're a writer out there, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, if you're feeling like, oh gosh, nobody's going to get this, or this is really weird, that's probably the very thing that's going to get the public really excited about.
Yes.
You've got to trust your voice.
Yes, absolutely. And, I love the publishing world, but it's very behind, and they're like dinosaurs. They take forever to do anything, so they can't keep up with the speed really of what is popular. And then by the time that happens, then they're willing to, go into it. But I remember I couldn't get a literary agent, and I had this literary agent tell me, she kind of strung me along for a long time with Madame Chic, the first book.
Oh, right.
And she said, Inés de la Fresage just released her book, Parisian Chic, and it's just too similar, which, by the way, it's not similar at all. So she just didn't get it,
Right,
And so
right.
she said, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pass. And so I was very, polite and thankful that she took the time. And then, but inwardly, I was like, okay, I don't need you.
Good for you.
Meanwhile, cut to, I shared this on my Instagram years ago, but Anthropologie, the women's clothing store,
Sure.
they bought Madame Chic, and I went to Anthropologie to go shopping, and I saw my book right next to Inez de la Fressage's book, right, and I just took a picture. I wanted to send it to her so badly.
That's fantastic.
Because it's like they just don't get it. And there is an audience for everything. That's what I'm finding. And something that I wanted to speak to that I've talked to Al about over the years is how important it is to market your book, whether you're traditionally published or not. So that's why I have my blog and my YouTube channel. And I know Al's done a series of YouTube videos here as well with another very popular channel on screenwriting. Is that correct?
Yeah. Home Courage.
Yeah. So marketing your books obviously are very important because no one will know about them if you don't do it.
And just to pick up on what you just said, there's an audience for authenticity, and so we have to trust that what we're passionate about is gonna find its audience, and we don't know what that's going to be, but it's a lot more satisfying to fail at something you care about than to fail at something that was some sort of calculated career move.
Yes.
So do what you love. And something that you taught me, something I really got from you, is that it really helps to build a platform. And when you put out your first Madame Chic book, you had already been doing a lot of blogging, and you had built up a fan base and interest in what you were talking about. And my guess is that probably gave you the confidence to publish the book when that agent said no. Yes. Because you already had the positive feedback from people going, I really like what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I actually have started, I've got a number of students right now who are writing nonfiction books. And the thing that I've been telling them to do or suggesting is that they need to work with people so that the sort of the ideas that they have or the theories that they have can be put into practice. Because that was my experience with the 90-day novel. Is what I think what really made it special was that it was interactive with the writers, and you want to. I think that the sort of the self-help books that are most successful are the ones where they kind of have this resonance, and you don't know exactly why, but there's something so specific about the advice that you can tell that the author actually has sort of it's been sort of road tested. It's not just sort of stuff that they came up with.
Yes. Yeah, an experience. Yeah. Well, Al, I just want to thank you so much for being a guest. This is just so cool for me to just be interviewing you. I just never thought as that, and our class, my class that I had with you, there were so many great writers in that class. I mean, we had Lillian Rivera, who published her young adult novels, Meg Deloach, who's a successful screenwriter, Rebecca De Mornay was in there. I mean, there's so many people in our class, and Al has so many esteemed students. You've got to check out his website and his testimonials. One of my favorite testimonials on his website was someone who said, I went into debt $64,000 in a MFA screenwriting course. Oh. What was I doing? I should have just taken Al's class. And it's so true. I mean, I always wanted to be a writer, and I went to USC, and I didn't even take any writing classes at USC, but Al's class was all I needed. So, if you want to write a book, you have got to check out his work. At least check out his books on the 90-day everything, novel, screenplay, rewrite. And then also Al is doing something that I'm really upset about because he wasn't doing this back in the day before I had kids, but he has retreats. And your next retreat is in Tuscany in May of 2020. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think you have, what is it? There's early registration and it's ending kind of soon.
That's right. Yeah, it ends at the end of September. I actually have an Ojai retreat in 2 weeks, and there's one room left. So if anybody's interested in going to Ojai, go to lawriterslab.com.
Okay.
And and then we've got Tuscany. It's 2/3 sold. So
why did you not do this back in the day? I would have loved to do. Yeah, I'm gonna be like 65 before I can go on this.
Yeah,
That's true. I'm just kidding. But when my children are older, I am so going on these retreats. I hope that you still do them.
Yeah.
Because I need to go to Tuscany. I need to get away from everything. I need to just write my next novel. And, how amazing would that be?
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to leave all of Al's information down below. And thank you so much for joining us today. This was just my favorite interview I've ever done. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time on The Daily Connoisseur.